Countdown begins in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you may be listening, whenever you may be listening. This is College Lacrosse Live. I'm Coach Q. That's Zack Capozzi. We're going to have ourselves a good time here. Oh, we don't have the name bars. Zach, I'm sorry. Look, I'll continuously say it throughout the show just to remember, let you all know that, that's Lax Reference, Zack Capozzi. But anyways, we've got a strong slate of games here this weekend. Weekend chaos, man. The top 20 media poll just came out. We're going to get into that here in just a second. But there are movers, there are shakers, there are fallers. And we also have some bracketology and some ELO movers on the Lax Reference side. So I'm excited for this one. Zach, what's up? What's happening, dude?
Yeah, man. The Ivies. The weekend of the Ivies.
They came back. I mean, the first week, it was like, oh, the Ivies are down. It's like, well, let us play our first game. How about that?
Yeah, and they did 7-0.
7-0. Okay, so we're going to touch on this here in just a second. I did have a couple other breaking news pieces. We're trying to get the D3 Grit segment here together. I want to play this goal real quick because we're going to give a shout out quickly to some D3 Grit.
Who cranked one.
Preston Huffman up to 12 shots on the day now.
Wow! He did it again! Riley Strube, his fifth, another signature.
Man, what a play there by Riley Strube. That was one of the moments where you just needed that one, so you give it to Riley Strube. Wow, that replay does it even more justice than it did live. Dive in.
All right, so we haven't covered D3 on the channel, but we got it right off the bat for you guys that are obviously some D3 lovers here. So yeah, I mean, that's not even his best goal of the game, Zach. There was a better one-handed play that he made. I hope that made SportsCenter. I didn't check this morning, but
I just look at that and I'm so excited to see a lacrosse highlight in full sun. With it doesn't look like the players are cold. Like that was awesome.
I'm guessing you didn't catch the Harvard Q's game then. There was a lot of people in attendance for a snowy Harvard Q's game. Me and Dan Arestia on Saturday, kind of, talking about the upcoming games, obviously in the morning. And one of the points we made was, look, it's going to be a little cold outside. It's not the dome. It's not 70 and sunny inside the dome. And lo and behold, Q's fallen. It looked like they were a little bit uncomfortable outside the dome. I mean, it was back and forth, but yeah. Anyways, anything else happened this weekend or this week for you, Zach? Anything personal before we get started?
No, it was a good weekend as always. We had some kids basketball and we got baseball starting up here soon. So yeah, it's always a good weekend.
How hard do you go into the stats for your kids?
0%.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. All right. Talking about 0%, 0% win record here for Boston College for the first time in quite some time. This is the women's loss, and I'm going to get to it up front. Again, we're not giving enough love to the women's game in D3 as well, and D2. Don't forget about them. But I've got this clip.
15 seconds.
There's the flip. It's Stein. Stein rolls back to the right hand. One more step. Back to the left. Shot, score! CC Stein calls game. Michigan defeats Boston College 10-9 in the 3.8 seconds left in the second overtime. CC ends it.
I am so happy for CC. She deserves that goal. She has been working the middle all game. All game she has been. It's fantastic to see her really put this away for the Michigan Wolverines.
What impressed me the most was seeing CC Stein as she rolls back to her left hand.
Nice goal there. The double rollback goal for Michigan over there. Again, Boston College going 0-3 for the first time since I don't know when. Anything on the women's side, Zach, that you've been kind of keeping up with before we get into this top 20 media poll and then into some bracketology?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you think about who's got the top spot on the women's side, and like, is the center of gravity really shifting? Stanford is a team that's like, I think they're undefeated. They were like fifth in the poll last time. Like, could we see a first time like West Coast #1 lacrosse team? Like, we'll see.
Yeah, grow the game, baby. All right, let's get into the top 20 media poll. I love doing this on Mondays because the media poll has just come out, so we get to see the exact kind of reaction here from the media on some of the weekend's losses. The way that we're going to do this, if there's a game that we are going to go into pretty in depth, we're not going to cover them, right up front. So North Carolina, #1, we get to talk about them because they had a game against Hopkins earlier in the week. But we get a new #1 in the top 20 here, media poll. We got anything on North Carolina here? They looked good against Hopkins. Petramala doing Petramala things. Owen Duffy they're just their cast of characters shined in this one and showed up. But we have a new #1.
Yeah, it's their stats are a little down from last year, but like this was their best game by far. I mean, best defensive performance. Wambach at the stripe really blew it out of the water like that. People were quipping like, didn't they almost lose to Jacksonville? But that was 3 games ago, and this team, the team that beat Hopkins, looked deserving of that spot.
Yeah, we've got Notre Dame coming in at 2, so we're going to touch on them. If the game happens and no one gets to watch it, did it actually happen, Zach?
I've spent a good amount of time in that stadium, and it's a unique place. But yeah, come on, someone could have had a camera going.
Yeah, I think there was like one cell phone stream, if I'm not mistaken. There was one guy that came in late. I think TLN. James Hogan was commenting on that. All right, we got #3 at Richmond. We're not going to touch on their Lehigh game. That was not close at all. I picked Lehigh to cover this, and I probably obviously shouldn't have. I'm a big Richmond fan. It wasn't because I didn't think Richmond was going to win. I just didn't know by how much. It was 6.5, the line there. But they blew out Lehigh.
Yeah, Army and Richmond, they're looking like teams that could survive an AQ loss. I think some of the weakness in some other areas. We always talk about this, and are they a team that could get in without an AQ? And so far, so good for both of those squads.
All right, Harvard with we'll go into the biggest win of the day, but arguably the biggest win of the day, if you could put up a debate, was Syracuse falling to Harvard. So Harvard moving up from #14 to #4. That was a huge move for them. We'll touch on that Harvard-Syracuse game, but anything up front for the Harvard team, Zach?
I don't hate that move. I mean, they've got the best set of wins in the country so far.
Okay. Cornell taking on Denver. We were eagerly watching the Manning goalkeeper here for Denver, letting in 13 here. I mean, again, they didn't even move in the poll, so I don't think this hurt them, I believe, whatsoever, this loss to Cornell. But obviously, they're getting the job done silently here, taking on a ranked Denver team and winning. Anything for Cornell?
I mean, the offense, like they were a little rusty against Albany, but they righted the ship on offense in this one. So good sign for the Big Red.
All right, we'll touch on Q's falling to #6. I'll only ask this question: is that too far?
I mean, I think if you pair it with Harvard going up as much as they did, I don't think it's necessarily too far. I mean, I think in the computer poll I had them still in 2nd. So like you could certainly make an argument that they shouldn't have fallen much at all. But I don't see anything wrong with that.
Okay, all right, I like it. Princeton moving up from #12 to #7. It's kind of interesting when you look at this game and where Maryland is. I came into the season saying, is this going to be one where the season is wide open, but Maryland kind of is stacked? So is Maryland just going to dominate and kind of run into championship weekend? They're going on back-to-back losses right now, losing to Princeton, obviously losing to Syracuse in the Dome. Moving up to 7 for Princeton. Any comments on Princeton? And then we'll have some comments on Duke as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like early season. Is that just the Ivies starting late? Is that what we're seeing here? And maybe we just discount those first week 1 games for all these guys and say, yeah, I mean, they were late to start. They knocked off some rust, and now this is what they really are.
Yeah, Schaller shutting down Kabiri, but that really didn't matter. We'll touch on this game here in a second. We're not going to touch on the Duke-Jacksonville game. Jacksonville has played. I'm assuming, I would love to know your stats on this, Zach, of like the strength of schedule for Jacksonville here, because they are just going through the gamut here, but losing to Duke in their one-sided loss this season here, 16-10. I'm a big fan of this Duke team. I love how big they are at the midfield. They're always going to have some of the best athletes on the field. They're always going to be coached really well. The offense seems like it's putting some stuff together here, scoring 16 on a good Jacksonville team.
Yeah, I mean, so far so good for Duke. The ACC in general is kind of a little bit under the radar this year, I think, because there's not been like the Ivies playing really well and the Big Ten kind of having some bumps. The ACC is just doing what they do, but and I think that maybe gets a little less attention. But yeah, so far so good for them. Jacksonville, 38th in terms of non-conference strength of schedule.
Wow.
So I think they've got some big ones, but they also have some bad ones. So it's not a consistently strong out of conference.
Gotcha. You just mentioned the conferences and their competition. So I mean, we can continue to make our way through the list, but I'd love to hop over to look at how the conferences are doing. I think you do a great job of tracking this, but I'll pull up your graphic here. Let's see if we've got it. So we got bracketology. Yeah, there it is. Perfect. Right away. What you got here?
All right. So this is a big change from where we were at the start of the week, right? So it was ACC Big Ten in terms of potential bids. Obviously, the Ivies 7-0 weekend really bumped them up. I mean, they were at like just above 2, expected bids, and now they're getting pretty close to 3. So yeah, I mean, I think the takeaway for me is that with that 7-0 weekend, if things continue like that, like the Ivy's probably going to be in a position where their in-conference games are going to be a big RPI boost, and the Big Ten is going to be not in that situation. So, I think the chances that you see a Maryland or a Penn State or a Rutgers like as one of those last couple of teams out, a lot higher than it was last week. Whereas the ACC, I mean, we're obviously not at the point where you'd say those 4 teams are in, but like
it's a strong
it may not be very long before we can say those 4 teams are in. And so, then you have that other piece around Army and Richmond. And I know we always talk about this, like, could one of those teams or could one of those conferences get 2 teams in, if one of those big boys doesn't win the AQ? I mean, it looks a lot stronger of a case than it did last year at this point. So, the Ivy could easily go 2-5 next weekend, and this becomes a very different conversation. But what the games they had and the 3 wins for those 3 teams, I mean, and then you got Yale having a really strong showing against BU. Could the Ivies have 5 again? I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
What a big win for the Yale program, man. I was kind of openly critical about them this past week and kind of where they're at, but beating a ranked Boston team and doing it in a fashion where the game wasn't ever really close. I mean, the closest they got, I believe, was like 3 goals kind of midway through the game. I was able to catch that one. But, yeah, big win. Shout out to Andy Shea and his team.
One more point on the Ivy League. It was 2022. They got 6 teams in, right? That was the year that Notre Dame and Duke got bumped off the end of the bubble. Harvard got in. They ended up with 6 teams. I looked at their out-of-conference record through the first few weekends of the season. And in that season, they were 10-8, right? The Ivy League went 10-8 over their first 18 out-of-conference games. They end up getting 6 teams in. Obviously, a lot of things happen the rest of the season, so it's not to say that this is necessarily going to be the same thing. But I looked at their out-of-conference record so far this year, 13-4, right? So they're actually better than the pace they were on in 2022 when they kind of took over the NCAA tournament, had 6 teams in. So something to keep an eye on, because if that keeps up, it's very possible that we're going to be in that situation again.
Is this a situation where if they continue on this pace and then they start to get to in-conference play, is that not something that's going to like cannibalize each other? It's actually going to be like, hey, you did what you needed to do in the out-of-conference play, and now you're playing such tough competition in conference that's not going to hurt anybody as it comes to the at-large bids?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think the mechanism here is the RPI, right? Because like so much, 50% of your RPI is your opponent's winning percentage. And that is almost entirely based on how well your league did out of conference, right? And so, because you're going to have all those games against Ivy teams, and if they won a bunch of out of conference games, it's just a huge boost to your conference RPI. Whereas like the Big Ten goes the other direction, right? Last year they won 77% of their first 22 out of conference games. This year they're at 68%. So it's that's going to be a huge factor. And so you could easily see the Ivies in the ACC, since they've got those really sterling records so far. They're just going to bump up those RPIs, and so you end up in a situation where a loss in conference doesn't hurt you because it's a top 15 RPI, and the win really helps you because it's a top 10 RPI. So yeah, I mean, huge implications for Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I'm going to jump back into the top 20 poll here in a second, but from this group that I'm looking at with the bracketology, and I love that we do this segment, by the way. Each week it's getting more important to talk about. We're also probably going to talk about the best win of the weekend, but which Ivy had the most important win, in your opinion, of the weekend? You're talking about a Cornell, a Princeton, a Harvard, a Yale. I mean, Harvard and Yale, that to me, those two stand out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Princeton one, honestly, and like the reason being is that like the A10 and the Patriot League could very easily be Richmond and Army as the two teams in, right? If they win the AQ, there's probably not going to be a lot of like surprise. But like, so then the question becomes like, you've got this fixed set of bids that are going to go to the Ivies, the Big Ten, the Big East. And so having Princeton knock off Maryland and another ding in the Big Ten's out of conference is, I mean, that's the one that I think if a team like Brown or Yale sneaks in as the last team in and knocks off like a Penn State or a Maryland or a Hopkins, that type of victory where the Ivy takes one from the Big Ten, those are the ones that really are going to have an oversized implication.
Okay, I'm going to pull us back in here to the media poll. We're kind of at around 8, 9. Appreciate you guys joining us, by the way. If you're here afterwards, if you're here live, appreciate you as well. You guys have been awesome all the way through as we kind of make our way into week 4 of doing College Lacrosse Live. You guys have been really getting active and engaged in the chat, and then afterwards we've gotten some comments as well. Appreciate the support that we've been receiving here. All right, let me see if I've got it. And bada bing, bada boom. We're back with Duke here. So we got 8, 9. Obviously, aforementioned Maryland, Princeton game here as we make our way through. So, well, look, we're going to jump into Maryland and Princeton, the actual game itself here in a second. Moving from 2 to 9, that's probably one of the largest drops that Maryland has had. I would also love to know what's the lowest they've been in like the last 4 years. I mean, it just feels like Maryland has been in the top 5 since I can remember for a lot of what they've been going through. So, I mean, making it to championship weekend pretty much every time. So we've got a number 9 Maryland again next week at Notre Dame. Wow, that's going to be big for them. Back-to-back losses as well. So if they go 0-3 in a 3-week span, that'll be setting records that they don't want to be setting there with the Maryland program. But anything for Maryland?
Yeah, I mean, so far the defense has been great, right? They've been consistent. It's the offense, right? They were at 42% adjusted in their win, and their 2 losses, they were at 34%. So I think that's their face-off unit's been pretty consistent. They were actually better in the 2 losses than in the victory over Loyola. So it's just that offense. If they have a good day, they can probably beat anybody. And if the offense is going to play like they did the last 2 games, they're going to be a very vulnerable team.
Yeah, it's interesting that we can like talk, the game between the lines and then have the data as well. Because when I watched the game, I think the offense point that you made is very apparent, right? Like I think Spanos had a couple, more goals than he's had, but some of that came in transition or in other areas where he was just able to get his hands free. He's got a rocket of a shot from that righty side. But I watched the defense and I was like, man, this defense is not playing well. It just from the eye test of like, hey, usually Maryland's pretty buttoned up. It felt like they were getting beat on some of the rotations. So it's interesting that you say that that the stats kind of show that they've been okay.
Well, and the interesting thing on defense for them is they've struggled late in the possessions, right? I mean, that's a big difference compared to maybe, when you think about a team with who doesn't lose focus, who doesn't lose, integrity on the defensive end. Like they've been 10 percentage points worse on shooting defense in the last 20 seconds of the shot clock. So like if you're going up against Maryland, the play is patient probe, wait for them to make a mistake on defense. And so, if they can get that communication and not have those issues late in the shot clock, like that probably solves a lot of their defensive problems. But, but again, in general, I mean, I don't think defense is necessarily the big problem for them. It's offense, but certainly late clock defense is an area where they can get a lot better.
Okay, Ohio State and Army. We're going to touch on the Army game here in just a second. Ohio State, it's kind of dominating High Point here at 13-5. They're up next at Georgetown. Ohio State, I mean, they had a couple transfers into the program. They obviously lost a big time player in Van Buren, but they're doing pretty well here. But they actually, moved down from 9 from last week to this, but they are going to be tested here. The Georgetown team that just came off a loss to Notre Dame. We'll see what Ohio State's made of.
They still got that Bobby Van Buren penalty.
I'm just it's a bias that I freely admit to. So we got Ohio State. We'll see where they're at Georgetown next week. Army, we'll touch on here in a second. Beating Michigan. Georgetown falling from 4 to 12. This is a lot of people's darlings, right? The dark horse for the season and getting the championship weekend. They fall in kind of convincing fashion. Notre Dame dominating them 15-9 in a game that no one was able to actually watch. But what do you got?
We believe that's what happened. Who knows? I mean, I think, the thing for them is like, against Penn, they were at 38% on offense. Against Notre Dame, they were at 32, So I think the optimist take on Georgetown is like they've got a lot of new pieces, fitting them in and getting cohesive offense is maybe going to take a while. But yeah, I mean, against Notre Dame, they definitely didn't have it on the offensive end. They turned it over on over half of their possessions against Notre Dame, that's not what you want.
Okay, Hopkins in their loss to North Carolina on Friday, moving. Actually, they didn't move at all, 13-13. So the media poll here not hurting them by losing to the number 1 team in the country. They're going to see Virginia. That should be a pretty solid game here. I'm excited to see that one. We've got Virginia actually moving up here. Their win against Stony Brook. This probably had more to do with Penn State and some others losing here, but Virginia moving from 15 to 14. Still don't know, I feel like, if I trust this Virginia team. I mean, they were beaten pretty soundly by Richmond. They obviously beat Colgate pretty soundly, but they get a test against Hopkins, and that's kind of where we'll see what they're made of. Anything on Virginia, since we're not going to touch on them later in the episode?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the useful thing for them, like against Colgate, they really struggled on faceoffs. They've been a lot better the last 2 games. So, that's a positive for them. I mean, Richmond torched their defense. So I think that's the big question that's still outstanding for them is they defense was great against Stony Brook, but like, how are they going to do against Hopkins, High Point, Towson? I mean, all teams that you'd expect to have a little bit more firepower.
All right, one of the, I would say, quote unquote, worst losses of the weekend was Penn State losing to an unranked Navy team. Navy, I believe, now ranked. We'll see if they are in this media poll. But AJ Marsh shutting down Hunter Aquino. I think Aquino had 2 points, 1 goal, 1 assist. But we'll touch on the Penn State Navy game here in a second. But anything on Penn State quickly?
I mean, great win for Navy. We'll see how that translates into the future. But it was not a great day for the Penn State offense.
Rutgers coming in here at number 16, taking a big jump, beating a Villanova team who is now kind of, I believe they're 0-2 since beating Penn State earlier in the year. Rutgers moving up here. I don't really have much. Their next week, I mean, they take on an undefeated LIU team. I should mention LIU. Big wins for their program, but they're going to be tested here with Rutgers. That'll be the first, really strong test of the season.
Yeah, Rutgers they're one that's always at the top of that, like most likely to be on the bubble list. So a lot of high leverage games for them.
All right, Denver taking down Cornell. Cornell taking down Denver, but still not moving here on the ranking. So looks like Cornell, getting the job done, but Denver plays Michigan next. I don't have much for this program. Doing well. Like, obviously, media didn't really see any reason to move them, but we'll see them at Michigan. Michigan coming off now back-to-back losses. Yeah. So some teams here are like in danger zone, Zach, from the situation of like 3 straight losses are going to look a little weird on your schedule.
if you have work to do to get into the work to do column, that's not a great spot.
Love it. Love it. All right, Michigan there. Denver is next week. We got a St. Joe's team where if you remove the Syracuse 20-2 loss, they are having a phenomenal start to the season here. I think they don't really care about, I mean, they care, but I think they're at number 18 here, and they're okay with where they're at and just kind of looking past that Syracuse loss. But they took down Towson earlier in the week. They got Monmouth and then a big matchup with Duke to see if they can kind of stay within this top 20 countdown.
That and Drexel, that'll be a sneaky fun game. I mean, those are two teams that are having a pretty solid start to their year. So, that Drexel game on March 7th might tell us more about them than the Duke game on the 1st.
All right, we've got Penn and Navy making their way. Yes, they got in at 20 after their ranked win here against Penn State. They got Boston next. Excited for that game. Man, I'll tell you, I watched the Boston-Yale game, and I'm just getting more into the transition stuff this year, 10-man ride, working in some substitution game. Fun games to watch. Navy actually scoring a couple substitution goals, or at least one that I saw as well. I'm really interested in that part of the game, but Boston's just a fun team to watch, man. Very fun team to watch. We'll see about this Navy win.
Always fun with the Patriot League. I mean, Navy, the thing that jumps out for them, first two games, they were at 22, or they were like 24, 25% efficiency. The last two, 36. So the Navy offense kicking into gear.
All right, I've got a great graphic that we're going to go into. That was the top 20 Inside Lacrosse Media Poll, by the way. Shout out to Dan Arestia, who joins me on Saturdays, who contributes to that poll. So good stuff. We always have a good time early, 9 a.m. Sometimes I'm hurting from the Friday night there on that show, but we're also here Monday mornings, a little bit later here today, 10:30 a.m. So appreciate you guys joining us. I've got a graphic that we've got that we want to pull up and touch on, which is kind of just talking about the biggest ELO movers from, I believe, this week as we kind of go. Oh, this is season. This is from season to season, correct, Zach?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So ELO, the idea, like, it's originally a model that was created for chess. Basically, the idea is when you win, you take rating points from the team you beat. And so it's a very useful model for kind of looking at program strength and where people are at. And one of the things I'm always most interested in is, like, if you win games convincingly against good teams, right, you're gonna earn a lot of points. If you barely squeak by against a team that you should beat, you're not going to earn any. So it's a useful way to just kind of look at the start of the season and who's been better than the expectations, which is, I think, the way to think about this. Because again, I mean, it's easy to look at the teams that are at the top of the poll and say, yeah, they're good. I think what's maybe more interesting is look at the teams that have been better than we thought they were going to be. And I think that's really, the way to think about the teams on the left side of this chart.
All right, so we've got trending up Mercer, NJIT, Drexel, Holy Cross. So a lot of teams kind of under the radar there. Obviously, Drexel is probably the biggest win when they kind of took down let me make sure I got that right. Who did Drexel beat here early in the season? What is their schedule?
So they beat Delaware, UMBC, Lafayette, and then their last game was not as good, a loss to Albany.
Got it. Okay, so we've got Queens, Harvard season over season doing extremely well. I would love to kind of dive into Harvard. Some people ranking them at number 2, number 3. I don't know if they got any first place votes, but what's the biggest season over season change for them from a perspective of, like, inside that team?
Yeah, there's two, right? The two things that really stand out. Last year, they were 68th in adjusted face-off win rate. This year, they're 22nd. Last year, they were 32nd in adjusted defense. This year, they're 4th, right? So,
wow.
The offense was great last year and has been great this year again. So it's not necessarily anything they've changed on that end, but the defense has just played so much better than they were doing a year ago, and the face-off unit's given them a lot more possessions.
I'm surprised that Bellarmine isn't being hurt by that 29 to something loss to Notre Dame. I believe that was them. But it looks like they're on this list as well.
The reason, like, you think about that, right? I mean, what was your expectation going into Bellarmine Notre Dame?
Loss.
Right. I mean, win probably, they were at 1% to win that game. They were at 3% to beat Duke and 3% to beat Ohio State. So none of those games is really going to hurt them that much from the ELO perspective, because, like, do we care? I mean, if they had lost 16-10 against Notre Dame or 29-10, right? Like, what's the difference? The thing is, though, like the games that they've won, they were only at 67% to beat Mercyhurst, 75 against Cleveland State, and 58 against Detroit, right? So in the games that we were actually, kind of a toss-up for them, they won all three. And so, that's the nice thing about ELO, right? They're not gonna be like, oh wow, they lost to Duke, but they beat Mercyhurst. Like, it's a good way to kind of say, on net, how impressive is that when you combine those two results? And again, you're losing to the three teams they lost to is not a big deal for Bellarmine. No one was expecting them to win those games.
Gotcha. Kind of more of a shock loss, right? When you see a record being set and something like that. But yeah, something that might not feed into the data as much. We got Brown in North Carolina. Where is North Carolina edging itself here into this top 10 trending up over season? Because they were already a strong team last year. Where are they finding that edge?
Well, and the funny thing is, like, it's honestly not from really, there's statistically they look about the same as last year. Like, the offense is a little bit better, defense is a little bit worse, face-off units a little bit worse. Like, statistically, like, this is, you could argue that this is a team that, like, and maybe this is where the Jacksonville game comes in, right? Because they didn't have, their numbers did not look very good coming out of that contest. So when you look at them season over for the whole season, like, that statistically, they don't really look that much better. Now, if you were to take Jacksonville out, it's probably a different conversation. But I think this is just one where, like, they've played, two, maybe 2.5 good teams. They've won all of them. Not a lot of teams around the country are undefeated at this point, right? You've got some other programs that, they've got a loss here and there. And so I think there's an element of this. It's just like, Harvard and Carolina have played a pretty solid schedule and no one's beat them yet. And that's a pretty reliable way to see yourself on this moving up graphic.
All right. Shout out to Mercer and NJIT here, who are the top performers season over season. So those coaching staffs doing a solid job on both the recruiting front and also just getting the W's. Anything to be said about the number one trending up here? Mercer.
For them, like, a big chunk of it, they're 30 spots better on offense than they were a year ago. They're doing a bit better on defense and a bit better from a face-off perspective. But that offense has really been effective, very effective. Dylan Bush, he stands out as kind of one of the primary drivers. I mean, he's got 13% of their assists. And so, he's been a guy that you look at and say, yeah, I mean, he's taken a quarter of their shots. He's got 13% of their assists. His efficiency rating is in the 86th percentile. So shout out to Dylan Bush. He's definitely been probably the engine that's driving that improvement. And we'll see how it unfolds over the rest of the season.
Zach, I'm going to say something that I probably have never said, and that I think Hampton wins this weekend. And I only bring that up because we're talking mid-majors, right? NJIT, Mercer. The year-over-year improvement on the offensive side for Hampton, to me, and the data might not show this, but what I'm seeing is that they're actually getting to that 10-goal margin. They're at 10 goals a game right now against, the competition that they're playing, and almost taking down VMI. I was not able to call that game. I was scheduled to call that game, but the system, I think they were having like power outages or something. Up at halftime, lost by 2, 17-15. I mean, the defense needs to figure itself out, but I'm going out on a limb. I'm not saying they will win, but they absolutely can win against Wagner this weekend, against not a great Wagner team.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the stats, since they started the program, they've never been better than 73rd on offense. The last year they were worst, 77th. This year they're 68th on offense. So it's, I mean, at that for a program like that, all you're looking for is what direction are we trending? And like you said, the defense has work to do for sure. Faceoffs have work to do for sure. But this is the first year they've had any of their units that looks like they could be competitive against some of those other programs down near the bottom. So yeah, I mean, I could see it. It wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, 0-3 Wagner team coming in there this weekend. You could see Hampton's first win. I'm not saying that they will. All right, trending downwards.
41% win probability for Hampton.
Is that their best win percentage that's ever been out?
Likely. Likely, yes.
All right, trending down here, we've got Lemoyne Bryant, Delaware, VMI Binghamton. Obviously, Delaware is probably stands out the most from that list, a program that has historically, been pretty solid. They pull out some upsets here, year over year, and they are on this list. Colgate as well, another big name that is on this list. But take me through kind of what stands out for you on the trending down season over season elo.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like, it's sometimes it's harder to figure out what's going wrong with a team than what's going right. I mean, some of these you look at, like Colgate, you could probably, there's a narrative there around they lost the Connors, and that's, obviously going to have a big impact on what they're able to do. If you look at a team like Lemoyne, I mean, they were a top 30 off or defense last year in terms of efficiency, and this year they're at 76th. Very likely that's, it's hard to say, especially on defense. Like, was that an individual player that they lost? Was it multiple players? I'm not sure if they have a new goalie, but that's one that definitely stands out. I mean, they were not a great offense last year, but at least they could hang their hat on defense. And so far, that's not been the case this year. So, you'd look to see if the staff can get that turned around over the next couple of weeks.
Speaking of staffs, it'd be interesting to kind of mirror this. And I know we don't have that information, but I would love to see like coaching staff changes on both of the trending up and trending down sides. I know for a fact VMI lost their head coach. Purpura went to Ohio State. He's now the offensive coordinator over there. But I'm not familiar with some of the other teams on this list of like, hey, do we get some strong coaching staff changes that may have led to this? So on both sides, right? You get the positive kind of boost from bringing in a new guy potentially, and then also the other side of like losing a solid coach could put you in this category.
Yeah, and I think on the trending down, especially this early in the season, right? If you do have a team where you've lost somebody and you've got new players in roles where they weren't in last year, you're asking them to do stuff they have never done before. I mean, on the trending up, I think that's I kind of suspect that's almost a more durable list, right? You'd almost expect that list to stay more consistent as the season goes along. Whereas, it's very possible that some of these trending down teams, as they work out those kinks, as they knock off the rust, and as they get everybody into those situations and they get more comfortable in what they're being asked to do, I could imagine some of these teams kind of getting it together and maybe not showing up here, and then we'll have to see who's on the trending down side later in the season.
All right, I had a graphic that I wanted to pull up here before we started kind of diving into some of these games. Let me make sure I can get that for you guys. It might be harder now that we are live, but we'll attempt it. Those of you that are live with us, appreciate you very much. This is College Lacrosse Live. We are here on Saturday and Monday mornings. As always, I'm sitting here with Zack Capozzi from Lax Reference. Zack, do you want to kind of shout out what you got going on here? Like, what's going on with Expected Goals Daily this week?
Oh man, so I've been playing around with doing a lot more game recaps. So basically, in the newsletter, I'll try to have a recap and a preview every day. Today, I did a cool article on like we talked about with the Ivies and how their out of conference record compares, and how every conference's out of conference record compares to this point last year. So that was a fun one to do. But yeah, I try to have a game recap and a preview every day. And if you tag a favorite team, you'll get something that's closer to the teams you care about. So Expected Goals Daily, Google it, sign up.
All right, I'm going to do a good job here, hopefully week over week. And, me and Zack talk behind the scenes as well and how we can improve this. I feel like we should talk more about the games as we're going through the poll, because then I feel like we're going back. But for now, what we're going to do is come back into the games for this weekend. Some of those games having, a lot of kind of implications on the season. I wanted to start with the game that nobody saw, but we will start with Harvard-Syracuse, another one that really played out.
Blonde's going to slide if he needs to.
Here comes Arndt to his left. Hands are free, but he wants to get right. He does. Ooh, good slide over on the doorstep. A finish to give Harvard the lead with 50 seconds to go.
Tell me that played for you. Did that play for you?
It was part of it did. Some of it was. Some of it looked stuck.
I'm gonna roll it back. Let's see.
Blonde's going to slide if he needs to.
Here comes Arndt to his left. Hands are free, but he wants to get right. He does. Ooh, good slide over on the doorstep. A finish to give Harvard the.
All right, Restream just killing me right now. But you caught a little bit more on that second clip. Yeah, again, Harvard probably with its biggest win here in the Jerry Byrne era, taking down a #1 ranked Syracuse outside the dome. This was back and forth, man. Like this game could have gone either way. I think the story of the game was probably that Harvard looked a little bit more poised and efficient on offense. Just from, again, that's just my eyes watching the game, seeing how it was. It was hard fought both ways. It could have went both.
Yeah, I mean, the resilience of Harvard. I mean, I think their win probably was down at like maybe 10% about halfway through the fourth quarter, and then they just went on a run and closed it out. Got the job done. So that's a big victory. It was, that was they beat Providence. They were expected to win that. Colgate was a bit of a coin flip. Like, they only had a 34% win probability coming into this one. And so this was definitely a statement win for them.
All right, we've got a 13-12 victory for Harvard here. They're 3-0, so they're one of the remaining undefeated teams. John Arant with 4 points here, 3 goals, 1 assist. Koberi, number 3. Malone only had 2 points. Jack Spidell only 1. Like some of the more notable cast of characters not coming through there. I watched. Obviously, everybody watches Spallina throughout the game. Spallina drawing some short sticks, loving the right island, contributing both from goals and assists. I think Spallina had 2 goals and 1 assist here, so he's just held to 3 points. I mean, that might be a story, but Michael Leo looked strong throughout. He drew a shorty throughout and was able to, again, initiate and start their offense. So I have a tough time saying like Q's did something wrong in this game, other than like some of the chances that were created weren't finished. Like, to me, that's what it looked like.
Yeah, I mean, and they're all. I think it was the defense is the thing that you'd look at and say like they were at 39% against Maryland, 37% against Harvard. So that wasn't huge, but and the faceoffs they had a 2 possession disadvantage against Harvard. They were +2 against Maryland, so there's a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, defensive wise, like they were at 22% against Maryland, 29% against Harvard, and in a tight game, that's going to make the difference.
All right, in footage that has never before been seen, we get an inside look at the biggest game of the weekend, Georgetown and Notre Dame. Enjoy. All right, you caught a little bit of that there. Restream is killing me today with some of these replays. I mean, it's going in and out, so I'm not going to show you all of those clips, but you saw Notre Dame with their, kind of just traditional walkout there with the bagpipes. From what I saw on these clips, it just looks like athletes all over the field for these guys, especially in the midfield.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys. I mean, Iago has been as advertised. He had 5 points to lead Notre Dame, 3 goals, 2 assists. Angrick, 4 points, 3 goals, 1 assist. Maharis looks good, man. Some of these clips, I'm like, holy crap! It's gonna be tough guarding the Notre Dame midfield this year, and that's crazy to say because they don't even have Dylan Faison.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, they like you talk about athletes. Like this has been just lethal in transition this year. Like they're shooting 62% in the first 20 seconds of the shot clock. Like that is an absurd number. I mean, 2 games, like they're not going to keep that up for the entire season. And it's not like they've even had to run in transition much because they've been up so much, but like 62% shooting in transition, you just don't see that.
Another storyline for this game is the goalie play, right? Like both goalies hovering around 40%. There is an element of like, hey, we're indoors again. Can you see the ball? Like, I just hate that we're even having to have this conversation, let alone the not being like televised. I don't even want to go down that route. But when you see both goalies at 40%, there's something to that. Yeah. So the Connor brothers doing what the Connor brothers do here, 4 points and 2 points to kind of lead Georgetown there. But this one was never close. Notre Dame got out to an early lead and just never looked back. here. So yeah, a stain on Georgetown's record here. But how much of a stain? I mean, Notre Dame could be the #1 team in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Georgetown, like who's going to be the other option besides those two, right? I think that's the thing that they've got to get figured out, because right now I mean, Rory's taken a quarter of their shots and Liam's got 40% of their assists. They just haven't got a lot from anybody else outside that group. So, again, early season, are we going to try? How do we figure out what the rest of that offense is going to look like? And if they can get some third and fourth guys that can kind of be there when somebody decides we're going to take away the Connor brothers, things look a lot rosier for that team.
All right, biggest win of the weekend might belong to Navy. Again, apologies. The video has been iffy to say the least here, but I'm going to bring up this clip and then let's talk it.
Here, Goers comes back near sideline and he stepped out of bounds. He stepped out of bounds with 11 seconds to go. Penn State will have a shot here with 10 seconds. At midfield, here's Leary. The final 7 seconds. Leary into the offensive end with 5 seconds. Back near side. Loose ball picked up by Navy. A.J. Marsh has it. And the Mids have upset Penn State today, 12-11. They race onto the field in celebration. Penn State got one last chance.
All right, a couple viral clips here of this ending too, because you had the football team. I always love when the football team comes out. You saw it from Notre Dame, but yeah, you could see them rushing the field shirtless. Might be the biggest win for Coach Amplo's team under his tenure. I need to look back at some of the schedules, but I mean, you're talking a top 10 win for Navy here. They get in the top 20 for the first time here this season. AJ Marsh holding down Hunter Aquino is definitely a narrative for this one, but anything from this game as we kind of make our way through this.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Navy. They've been a little volatile. I mean, maybe it's Penn State that's been volatile, but Matt Haley is having a great start to his year for Navy, and so I think that's the kind of thing that when your top usage players, 88th percentile for efficiency, that cures a lot of ills. He's shooting the ball better than he did last year. I mean, pretty much every number for him, ball security is a lot better. So, Matt Haley's been the engine that's driving that offensive bus, and if he's going to keep shooting at the numbers he's shooting at and having as many assists as he has, I mean, that's a dual threat for them, and you can build an offense around that. Yeah,
Dan Arestia was calling this as the kind of sneaky trap game of the week, and one of the reasons, so great call by Dan on that, but also not a great call on why, because he said in order for this to happen, Zach Hayashi would need to step up. Zach Hayashi went 3 for 12, 25%. A dominant face-off man here going 25%. It happens. Yeah. You know what? But again, Penn State winning the face-off battle there. The Penn State goalie, though, was a topic of conversation early in their season. When Hawkins went 43%. So that's not terrible. I mean, it's not good, but it's not in the 30%. But this is what people were kind of saying would be maybe an Achilles heel for Penn State. Didn't help them on that day.
Yeah, they against Princeton they were great. Against Navy not so much. And I think one thing that's interesting against Princeton is Princeton only took, for every 10 possessions they had, they only took 6 shots. So the Penn State defense did a really good job of preventing even shots occurring against Princeton. Against Navy, all 3 of these games basically averaged 9 shots for every 10 possessions in the other 3 contests they've had so far. So, you could look at that and just think about, okay, is it that the defense just needs to be a little more aggressive in trying to prevent shots from happening? I mean, clearly, I think they need to protect their goalies more than they did in past seasons. Against Princeton, they were able to. In the other 3 games, they weren't, and I think that's a big part of why they're 2-2.
All right, probably our last of the kind of big upsets of the season or of this weekend here, Maryland Princeton.
Schaller checks him. Princeton stays with it. Tucker Wade battling the shorty. Wade now switched on to a long pull. Shot on the way and a goal, 6-5. You knew at some point you were going to see Peter Bonanno again. He had one in the first quarter. He's got one here. It is 6-5 Princeton. What a goal that
And this was a close one throughout the game. I mean, it was back and forth. Schaller doing a phenomenal job on Kabiri, by the way. Kabiri being held to 1 point. He had 1 assist. This is a preseason All-American attackman here who did not have his best game. Palumbo and Bonanno, though, making up for it with 3 points apiece. On Maryland's side, Eric Spanos getting the 4 goals, 0 assists. I think 2 of those came in transition, if I'm not mistaken. Got his hands free. It wasn't that he was kind of beating his guy. It was more so kind of off some rotations. Leo Johnson with 3, Zach Whittier with 3, and Lyons with 3. So, well balanced from the offensive side here. But you were mentioning earlier in the episode that, hey, this still doesn't look great from their side. At least the stats would show that. But yeah, Princeton with maybe, again, there's a bunch of debate, but this could be the best win of the weekend too.
Yeah, I mean, Terps, it's like, it's interesting because, right, it's not, in a couple years ago, they had a big turnover problem, and that was their big Achilles heel. When they turned it over, they weren't getting shots, they were losing. When they didn't turn it over, they were getting good shots, they were winning. So far this year, that's not a problem. They've been they actually had more shots on a per possession basis against Syracuse and Princeton than they did against Loyola. Probably partly because they were getting a lot of run down the field, shoot one time and score against Loyola. But they shot 46% on an adjusted basis against Loyola. They've been at 36 the last 2 games, right? So, shots on goal, right? 77% against Loyola, 70% against Syracuse and Princeton. That just feels to me like the offense isn't getting the kind of shots that they want to get, right?
It does feel that way.
They were able to do it in the last 2, they weren't. Not necessarily a ball security problem. It's just, the offense isn't producing the kind of shots that I'm sure Coach Tillman is looking for.
Can't see your numbers on screen. Not sure what numbers we're looking. Maybe the number. I don't know if you want to see what Zach's looking at. It's looking like the Matrix probably on his screen. But let me know what you're talking about there, Daniel, and I'll try to fix it. But appreciate you guys showing up here today. We're almost through our Monday episode here. Not much more to say on Maryland's front. I will say again, like earlier, we were going through the top 20 poll. I was mentioning, watching this game, Maryland looks not great from the eye test on the defensive side. Like the rotations were a little bit late. There's just something with the team defense right now that kind of needs to click a little bit more for me in the way that Maryland has always looked. We always expect Maryland to be a top 10 efficiency, top 5 efficiency defense. Where do they sit right now, Zach?
Yeah, so they're, in terms of their defensive ranks, they're 27th in the country from a defensive perspective. And like I mentioned, I mean, that I think it was Maryland that we were talking about. Their late clock defensive work has been the problem, and I think that's the one that if they can button that up, they'll be back to where we expect them to be probably. But yeah, right now 27th, which that puts them second to last in the Big Ten.
Gotcha. Okay, we've got one last game that I really want to cover, and then we can kind of close out with anything we want to here. I think we've got about 10 more minutes here. We started about 5 minutes late. So let's get to this last game.
Back to Evan Plunkett. Off the screen. Frees his hands. Feeds down low. Shot to score. Plunkett to Fellows are in sync.
Unbelievable heads up by Evan Plunkett. Plunkett had plenty of opportunity to take a rip. As you see him driving with his left hand, off that pick, gets some space, but heads up, finds Gunnar Fellows down low. Why take?
And you want to talk about some offensive talent and just a good eye test. I'm sure the data says the same thing. Army here with a strong team. I mean, we've been talking about the Plunkett since the beginning. Gunnar Fellows actually led, I believe, their offense in points. They obviously have a great defense with Sean Byrne. We'll continue to kind of watch how those polls kind of replace what they lost in Palat last season. But, I mean, Army is a solid team here, beating a Michigan team who is now 3-2, but has lost the last 2 games there. And I'll add one last thing here, Zach. Speaking of a game where we didn't get to watch, I was all set. I had my computer, my laptop was all set with ESPN Plus, and then we just didn't get to see the start of the game. I like that was the game I was tuning in to watch when all 15 games happen at once, and I wasn't able to watch it because I think they had some problems down there at Atlanta. I caught the highlights, but it was one I definitely was upset I didn't get to watch live. Any thoughts here on Michigan taking down Army? Or I'm sorry, Army taking down Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm always interested in is when you've got a team that kind of has players doing the things that they're good at and not doing the things they're not good at. And it was interesting that clip you showed with Plunkett hitting Fellows. That's an interesting one, right? Because Plunkett's he's only got like a 40% like on goal shooting percentage. He's not necessarily the guy that you're looking to finish those shots, but he does have 34% of their assists on the season. Then you've got Fellows, right? He's kind of the opposite. He's taken 16% of their shots. He's made 65% of his shots that are on cage this year, right? So he's finishing it at an absurd rate. Fountain is finishing at an absurd rate. Like they've got guys that are really, really effective putting the ball in the net. And then they've got, Plunkett, who's able to kind of get the ball to those guys. I think the interesting thing, I'm always interested in this, right? If you're a defense and you're going up against Army, how do we make Evan Plunkett the guy that's taking the shots instead of the guy that's creating shots?
There's your coaching hat there, Zach.
There you go. Right. So I think that's the thing that, you will be interested to see if when they go up against, because they've got Lafayette in a couple of weeks and then BU and then Carolina is the big one on March 21st. Right. Like, is Evan Plunkett the kind of guy that's going to kind of develop that shooting stroke so that he can be a dual threat? Or are they going to run up against somebody that figures out how to make him the finisher and not let anybody else get going? But, so far it's been a very effective formula for them. And, there's no necessary reason that they have to run into trouble from that perspective. But, it is the kind of offense where they've got their quarterback and then they've got the other guys around him that are putting the ball in the back of the net at a very, very high rate.
One of my most favorite teams to watch on offense. Their offensive dodgers are so direct with just getting downhill or getting to the points that they want to get to. There is no wasted time. They're not dilly-dallying. They are some strong athletic dudes that are trying to get by you quickly and straight to the point. So, yeah, good stuff. Another thing about this game, I'm looking at the stats. Again, I wish I could have saw this live, but the goalkeeping in this one, Sean Byrne, big friend of the channel, big friend of Sean Byrne, obviously, his kind of goalie of the year candidacy this year, taking Army to where they need to. They're 4-0 right now, 58% in this one, Zach. Hunter Taylor, Michigan's goalie, 32%. Yeah. So that, in a 13-11 game, you could even say that was the I don't want to say one stat was the difference, but that is a huge difference there between Sean Byrne and Michigan goalie Hunter Taylor.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's so there's so much that goes into goalie play and whether a shot should have been stopped. But you look at Michigan, they're 14th nationally in terms of shot on goal rate, right? So are they letting offenses get comfortable and getting to the spot where they can put shots on cage? The defense has been pretty effective as far as that goes, but then their save percentage is at 30th, right? And that's not always a one-to-one where you'd say that's the goalie's fault necessarily, but it is a little suggestive that, if the defense is not letting offenses get shots on cage, but then a lot of the shots they're getting on cage are going in. Now, again, that could be because they're playing a style of defense. That means that you're either getting a really bad shot from 30 yards or you're getting a shot on the doorstep and they're kind of all or nothing.
The Gunnar Fellows clip right there showed us he was right on the doorstep. It's tough to say that.
That's where you could say maybe it's not a goalie issue, but when you look at that across the whole season and you see a 16% gap between shot on goal rate and save percentage, that's something that one of those two numbers has got to go in a better direction.
All right. I appreciate your work here on today's episode, Zach. Last thing we're going to do, and then we can hop into any last pieces you have if there's a graphic that we haven't hit or something that you want to bring up. Games that are upcoming, right? Actually, Army's playing right now, by the way. They're playing Mercer right now. It's 4-2 here in the second quarter. So low-scoring game there. Mercer kind of staying within striking distance. I've got, obviously Maryland and I believe Notre Dame is probably the game of the weekend. Let's be honest. But Syracuse, Princeton as well. North Carolina, Penn. Anything on the kind of upcoming games that you think we need to be on tap for?
Yeah, I think it's we've got more of these interconference games that make such a big difference in how things flesh out over the rest of the season from an RPI perspective. So I think it's just, a lot of the narratives that you're going to hear on Selection Sunday are getting baked, on these weekends. And, when you've got an ACC versus an Ivy League game, North Carolina and Penn, right? Does the Ivy dominance continue? Can Penn take one, from Carolina? Syracuse, Princeton, who knows now? That's basically a toss-up. I've got Syracuse at 44% win probability, Princeton at 56 as the home team. So It's just fun to see these interconference games and kind of as we get a better sense of who's good and who's not.
Yeah, Navy Boston is going to be a big one. We've got Yale Penn State. So we're in it, man. Hopkins, Virginia. It's a good time during the season here as we look forward to week 5.
Brown Bryant. I mean, Brown can sweep the Rhode Island series this year. If they already got Princeton, if they can get Bryant too, that'll be what is it? The Ocean State, I think. They can claim whatever trophy they
you got to talk with Dan. One time we're going to have to do an episode all together because Dan loves, especially the Northeast rivalries and the namings and the cups. So yeah, for sure. I don't know it, but I'm sure there is a name for that series. All right. The last thing that we're going to bring up here, I believe, is a really cool segment that Zach has been doing, which is the frontiers here, the offensive efficiency frontier. Let's touch on that and then let's wrap out. Also, appreciate you guys. Again, this has been a great episode. We're going to head out here in the next, I believe, 5 minutes. But offensive efficient frontier, let's get after it.
Yeah, so these were the 7 games of the past week that the way to think about this is you can be very productive, but you can also be productive by having tons of shots, right? So what we really like to see is the players that are producing a lot of value on a limited number of touches. And so these are the guys that kind of did that. And I also have the element of who'd they play, because it's easy to have, Goldstein, for example, production was not quite as high as some of these others. I mean, 7 points is still pretty phenomenal. Petramalo, 5 points. But they did it against better defenses, right? And then you've got some of these guys like Caffarelli from Monmouth. Wagner is not a good defense, but he had 9 points and only 1 turnover. So I think what we're trying to do here is highlight the players that even if they played a bad defense, were they so efficient that they deserve to be mentioned. Then the flip side is you've got a guy like Petramalo, 5 points, 3 turnovers. Shout out to Kyle Devitt. He had 2 Devitts in that game, right? Which is not necessarily a great number, but you do it against a really good defense. And so that deserves to be recognized. Then you got down there Siena Saints, which we now know is their mascot. Radomski had a really great game against Binghamton, 10 points, only 2 turnovers. Plen from St. John's, I mean, it's another one, right? You look at 4 turnovers and maybe you'd say, okay, well, that wasn't a very efficient game, but he had 8 points on not a lot of shots, right? And so that's still 88th percentile efficiency, even when you factor in those turnovers, which is worth calling out. So, again, you can be productive, you can be efficient. What we want is the guys that are both.
I love it, man. This is some really great insight. Hopefully you guys are seeing the value here in what Zach is bringing. Ryan Stein's in the Utah team is one that I'm just super interested to see throughout the season, man, and how they do and how they wrap up, as they go through. I love that program and what they're about. All right. That's going to be it for College Lacrosse Live here today on a Monday. Appreciate you guys joining us this morning. We will be back Saturday morning, 9 a.m. I have to figure out a co-host, though, because Dan Arestia is at the PLL Championship Series. So I need to figure that out for you guys, but I will hopefully be coming live here 9 a.m. on Saturday. And then, of course, we'll be back on Monday to recap the Week 5 games. But, Zach, appreciate you, sir. Any last words as we get out of here?
Good luck to all those Northeasterners in this snow. I mean, we're sitting down here in the South and not worrying about it. Oh, man. We're going to have more snow games this weekend?
I am so over this whole winter season. Just bring on the spring. But thank you, guys. See you next time.